Welcome to Surviving Bad, and thank you for joining us on this special edition of Surviving Bad, brought to you from MFL MarMac High School in Monona, Iowa. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we've assembled a group of students, educators, and community members to get a look at what's going on with alcohol, marijuana, and vaping. Now, these are our future leaders, and they're standing up to alcohol, marijuana, and vaping, and they are making a difference. Let's begin with an introduction from Principal Larry Meyer.
Hi, Peter. We'd like to welcome you to Monona. We feel lucky and fortunate to be on this edition of Surviving Bad, and all of us here at MFL MarMac want to thank you for allowing us to join you. Thank you very much.
And thank you for having us, Larry. A couple of months ago, at an event at the state capitol, I had the opportunity to hear a passionate presentation by Lauren Gillitzer, her personal story. And I learned she was a leader of a soda group right here at MFL MarMac. Students opposed to drugs and alcohol. Now, she is one reason why we're here today. And here she is to share some of her story. Lauren, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Hello, my name is Lauren Gillitzer. I am currently a senior at MFL MarMac High School and the president of our soda club. Our soda club stands for Students Opposed to Drugs and Alcohol and has been led by Jackie McGue and within our school for roughly 3 years now. When I first joined this group, I never imagined that I would be taking part in something like this. Our group first began when our school started seeing struggles with students regarding substance abuse. Therefore, the staff wanted to get ahead of that repeating cycle. Since starting the club, we actively take part in Red Ribbon Week, homecoming, monthly themed activities, or messages geared towards substance abuse prevention. We also partner with 5C, our local coalition, and attend their meetings when we are able to. And we have given public service announcements on our local radio station, KCTN. And finally, we have Christmas and summer pool parties where fun can be had without the use of substances. SOTA strives towards belonging to a group that has the same morals and values, where you fit in for making good choices that lead to healthier outcomes. Our message is that each student and each person in this community matters. We each have a choice, and hopefully those choices are more positive than negative ones. In February, I was able to express these messages at the state capitol in Des Moines, where I first met Peter. I gave a speech about what substance abuse is like here in our community and what its impact has had on our students. I addressed the fact that students here pertain the mentality that experimenting with alcohol, vaping, and marijuana isn't bad if I only do it a couple of times. My speech was centered around the different paths students are taking regarding substance abuse and what the Soda Club does throughout our school. Although substance abuse appears to be a never-ending issue, I feel that if more schools had clubs like SOTA, the attitude towards substance abuse would alter. I am very excited for this opportunity, and I can't thank Jackie and Peter enough for this opportunity that's happening today.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And thank you. We'll be back after a short break to join our first group of panelists and start things off with an inside look at alcohol. You don't want to miss this.
When Noah's mom brought him to drug rehab, she never thought he'd end up back here again. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
I hope it helped. See you guys next week.
Ready for lunch, Noah?
Yeah, Mom.
If you or someone you know is recovering from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad, where we're visiting with the students and staff at MFL MarMac High School in Monona, Iowa. Let's start with a look at alcohol through the eyes of a PE teacher and coach, Chet Bachman, and then later, student Sasha Schulte.
I've been teaching driver's education now for probably over 20 years, so I've seen a lot of speakers come in, state troopers, local law enforcement, those kinds of things. And I guess the message that we always send to the kids And the first thing we say is defense wins championships. We think we could tie the two together. And that you're all going to be filled with choices, and the best defense is to not get behind the wheel and drink and drive. And the story that I have to share with the students every year is a real life story. My grandmother was killed by a drunk driver, and it's actually the intersection by Strawberry Point High School, and it's now a roundabout intersection. And after the story, or after everything has taken place, I'm reading the Gazette newspaper, and in the Gazette newspaper, I read the story about the gentleman that killed my grandmother. And the gentleman is rehabilitating himself in prison, and I'm kind of shocked by the story. I believe he served 15 years in jail at that time, and was happy that he was rehabilitating himself. And I guess the moral of the story was, as it finished, his life after prison was pretty long. His wages were decreased for the rest of his life, for paying fines and lots of other things. But my message in our story to the students was, the choice that you make in a small amount of time can affect the lives of others and yourself forever.
Thank you, Chet. Thank you for sharing. And Seisha?
So we all know people who drink alcohol. Some of us know others who have one too many too often. Personally, I have lost 2 people in my family due to alcohol, both my uncle on my mother's side and my oldest brother, Ryan. In the summer of 2003, my brother Ryan took his last breath in the back seat of a car. He was asleep when the car hit the pole that night. He died instantly. The passenger, one of his best friends, died days later due to injuries from the accident. And the driver, he walked away with a few bruises and was heavily intoxicated. When I think about life, if my brother was still around today, it's very difficult. I like to think that during holidays, we would watch The Gladiator, one of his favorite movies. My brother and my father would talk about who would make it to the Sweet 16 or the Final Four. My mother wouldn't have to drive her kids to visit him at his grave. And my other brother, Brant, possibly could have taken the tests needed to become a Navy SEAL instead of attending his brother's funeral that week. And as for myself, I would know what my brother's voice sounds like. I'd be able to make memories with him, and I wouldn't be standing here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seisha. We've assembled a panel of 2 students, Gabe and Maya and Julie, to talk about some of the issues they face, the feelings they face, and the challenges they face with alcohol in the community. Julie, tell us a little bit about what you do and why you're here today.
I am a member of the 5 Cs of Clayton County. We work with educating of youth and adults in drugs and alcohol. The first meeting that I seen advertised in the paper drew me to it because I had lost a brother to a drunk driver, November 8th, 2009. It was a time in my life that it rocked my world. Following the time through the investigation and going through seeing her the day that she was sentenced to prison, and she turned around and she said to the family that she didn't have time to put any words together. And I guess she was intoxicated, and the only words we were looking for was, "I'm sorry." It's been years later, it's almost 10 years later, and the day that she was released out of prison, we went down to Des Moines, and you could see her skip across the stage knowing that she was going to be released because she did all her classes. She did what she had to do to be released. She got up and she still couldn't say, "I'm sorry." My daughter wrote a letter asking for the words, "I'm sorry," letting her know that by her night of drinking and at 5:20 in the morning, the accident that killed my brother, and what it did to our family, what it did to the family in general, that it tore the family apart to a point, asking for the words, "I'm sorry," and she couldn't say, "I'm sorry." You know, I think that when you drink the alcohol, you choose to make that, but to go through life and not have the words to say, "I'm sorry," I'm not sure how I can comprehend that. Getting involved in 5Cs is, I believe, if we work with youth, we work with adults, it's our chance to educate the public, work with the public, and hopefully by doing that, we can change the ending of a story for somebody else's life. And I think that's a huge idea of where I truly believe in my heart that 5Cs has been such a positive to the community. Seeing the youth get involved through the soda group has been phenomenal to see you speak out.
Thank you, Julie. That's good enough. Gabe, what are your thoughts? You know, this is a little bit, you know, we all try to, you know, as adult figures, and I'm a dad as well, we know that the favorite thing is not to listen to us tell you what not to do. But hearing stories like this, what does that make you feel like?
It's just that, like, I'm here because I've seen it affect my friends and, you know, people throughout the high school. And ever since I was a little kid, like, my mom runs a soda group, so I've had values instilled in me that, you know, alcohol's bad, smoking's bad, everything's bad. So seeing it affect, like, how other kids don't get taught the same way on the way up, their parents are already affected by smoking, drinking, whatever. I feel remorse for them because they haven't had, you know, I feel very lucky is what I'm saying with my parents and my family for how I've been brought up, and I just wish everybody else could experience the same lessons and things that my parents have taught me, I guess.
No, those are good points. Maya, what brings you to the table today?
What I've thought about alcohol and all of this is that it damages a lot of people in a lot of ways. It can hurt them in many ways, and they don't know about it. They don't know what it's going to do to them, and it really confuses me as for why they do it, and they don't understand why.
Do you feel like sometimes all the stuff in media and on social media and TV shows and movies sort of helps push bad behavior like that?
Yeah, like a lot of commercials and a lot of broadcasts and all of that, they always promote it in some way or another. And people that usually watch them are like young and not usually like older, and they think that it's perfectly fine because people are promoting it.
Gabe, what about you? Do you think there's a world pushing you towards doing bad stuff, or is there more stuff pushing you towards doing good stuff?
There's definitely positive, but 100% there's more negative. Like, we have these idols, you know, professional athletes, actresses, actors, and, you know, they're doing a lot of celebrating with all the money they got, and a lot of times that involves bad substances, alcohol, things like that. So if those are the people we look up to and that's what they're doing, that's going to make us think that that's a cool thing, when it definitely isn't. But I feel like the leaders in the world, like, there are some good, but the people who affect us the most aren't doing the best things they could be doing, I guess.
It's an interesting point, because a lot of times when we speak to people, we have to look back and say that my generation, you know, the generation with gray hair, often created opportunities for bad things happening. And sometimes we haven't always given you the best world possible, and some of that is maybe allowing too many threats. Now, Julie, you work in prevention. How do you manage sort of dealing with these threats that we've allowed to exist at the same time you want your youth to be able to make decisions without being told what to do?
I think the answer that I believe in my heart is by educating and sharing experiences that happen, by hoping to show that things aren't right because of where it's at now, that by educating and working with them, that we can make it a better world, making the next step, showing people that it doesn't have to be the same world. It's our option to make that choice.
Gabe, do you think that it's a good point she makes, that part of saving the world is to stop some of these high risk and bad behaviors?
Yeah, absolutely. things that affect people the most are always true personal stories. Like if you go watch a movie, like something that's not real isn't going to affect you as much as a true story. So when she talks about what happened in her life, I'm sure it touches everybody's heart.
Maya, if you could change something in the world, and if you had the power to say, I'd like to change this one thing, I'd like to see this change so that I don't have to be as scared or deal with so many of these stressors, what would you do?
In my opinion, I think I would tell everyone of what alcohol or any type of substance does to any age, because a lot of people don't notice it, and I feel like everyone should.
And it's sort of sad because these are also people you live with and have to grow up with. Thank you very much for sharing. You know, we get a chance to share a lot of ideas, and we're going to get deeper into some, but one thing we've learned from this panel is that the lessons that we know when we've lived a lot of years aren't much different than the ones that you're learning now, and we're trying to figure out how to help. So stay tuned. After a short break, we'll bring in a new group of guests to talk about marijuana. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
Please, listen carefully. This is for real. We will save the life of a child. There are dangerous drugs in the hands of young children in Iowa. Synthetic drugs, sometimes called fake marijuana, and bath salts. They are in our communities and schools. Talk to your children now. Get help at drugfreeiowa.org.
My dad thinks he can fix anything, but at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We'll start this segment by taking a look at marijuana through the eyes of Jed Jones of Clayton County Sheriff's Department and student Abby Shellhorn. Jed, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So what is marijuana? It kind of sounds like a silly question, right? I think we all have a general idea what marijuana is in the definition, but generally speaking, marijuana is a drug, right? And what's a drug? Well, from a law enforcement perspective, a drug is any substance, whether it's legal or not, that when it's taken in the body can impair that person's ability. Specifically for law enforcement, that impacts us for driving, right? So it impairs your driving ability, but it does more than that. It impairs your judgment, your emotional being, your health. So there's a lot of different things that it can impact negatively. There's a common consensus with marijuana, particularly amongst the youth, that marijuana is a harmless drug. Well, that's just not accurate, okay? All drugs have negative consequences, and marijuana is no exception. I've been in law enforcement for going on 15 years, and I can tell you, out of all the encounters I've had with people that are abusing marijuana, doesn't matter what age, if you look at the columns of negatives and positives, the negatives far outweigh the positives, okay? And again, marijuana is not an exception to this. So, regardless of the legality of marijuana, it's always going to be a drug. And going forward, when you guys, entering adulthood, you're going to have a lot of decisions to make, and it's your responsibility to educate yourself, ask your peers, ask people that know, compare other people's lives to yours that are using drugs, particularly marijuana, and ask yourself, what's it going to benefit you? How's it going to benefit you? And I promise you, when you really think about it and you draw that list up, you're going to find out that there's just not a lot of positives. So with that, thank you for your time, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you, Jed. Abby?
Marijuana, a very powerful medicine and/or drug that can be very helpful in many different ways, such as healthy medicines, hand creams, and energy relaxers. But if used in an inappropriate way, harmful conditions can and will occur. Effects include addiction, overdose, and in the worst case, death. I believe if marijuana is used correctly, there are benefits. But if used incorrectly, the events will be traumatic. Only 11 out of the 50 states have fully legalized marijuana, and Iowa is not one of those 11 states. In Iowa, medical and illegal marijuana is not allowed, but why is marijuana a big deal with teens? One answer to the question may be the new products that electric cigarette companies who are inventing and supporting the idea of smoking marijuana to the minds of teens may be one of the answers. We need to stop the spread of illegal marijuana before time runs out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. And now we join our panel to talk about marijuana, this mystery thing that's got everybody excited. And we have Megan, Max, and Ann. I want to start with you. Usually I like to start with a student, but in this case, we know that the whole sort of mystery around marijuana revolves on the difference between CBD and THC.
Sure.
Can you give us a little insight as to that?
Sure. So the CBD is the oil that is the medicinal portion that is this, it helps definitely with helping people who might have seizures or might have some sort of medical use for it. And so that's the plant portion of the marijuana. But if you get into the THC, that's the part that gets you high. And that's the illegal part of the marijuana. And what we're seeing is that this THC level is going increasingly upward. And in the last 20 years, we've seen that level go up dramatically. And the variance between THC and CBD that they're putting in the marijuana that our teens are smoking has changed approximately 80%.
That's a big change.
It's huge.
Now, I'd like to, Max, let's start with you. It's been said to me by many people that the whole controversy between CBD and THC has been about getting a whole new group of users to use things like THC because it has the potential, because it's addictive, to be a gold mine like tobacco and alcohol. How's your thought about that as a student? Are these kind of things that you think about?
Sometimes, yeah. I think that THC is one of the main, rather the levels of THC is one of the main reasons that marijuana is becoming harmful, because it was used in the 70s, but back then THC was at like 3%, and now it's gotten up to like 80% in some cases. And I think that's a big part of what's making it so harmful now. And I think that especially with the benefits I see of CBD, I see personally and within like family and friends, I've seen benefits of CBD and the negatives of THC. But I don't know, it's just that we need to be able to use it responsibly, because I think that CBD is something that I don't want us to have to pass up, but irresponsible use of THC. And I'm not saying all use of THC, but especially when it gets into those extremely high concentrations of THC, I think it becomes much more detrimental for us.
And Ann, what brings you here today?
Years ago, I had an uncle who cousin started out using marijuana and later got into harder drugs. So marijuana to me has a more personal connection because I've dealt with it with my dad, my cousins, and many other family members.
So do you feel it's been more detrimental than beneficial in that case?
Kind of.
We see a big controversy because we're in this dialogue here talking about CBD and THC, and they're two completely different things. You could have CBD products or THC products. But it's said that the industry, the marijuana industry, is trying to confuse the issue between the two, somehow suggesting that they need to be used together. Do you sense that? Do you sense them focusing more on the THC than the CBD?
I think that the marijuana industry for sure, especially not the medical industry, but the marijuana industry is definitely putting an effort into making money off of people. And I think that it's much easier to make money off of someone when they're addicted or abusing something. And I think that's why cigarette companies flourished before we knew any of their downsides. And I think we know the downsides of THC, but I think that the ignorance of the difference between CBD and THC is the biggest reason we're not being more cognizant and understanding of the downsides and what we can do, and understanding that they're not really looking out for our well-being the companies.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, a business isn't necessarily based on what's good for you, it's what's good for them. Now, do you think that, let's go to both sides. Have you think about this while you answer this. Do you think a world without marijuana would be just as beautiful and good a world?
I most definitely think so. I just want to branch off of what Ann had said and just relate to the students here that we have a former student who had a boyfriend that started out using marijuana and then did turn to heroin and committed suicide as a result. So I do think that we could have a beautiful world without marijuana, most definitely, and that's a prevalent example. And that student was a student that I coached, so it's definitely one.
Thank you very much, thank you all. And stay tuned after a short break. We're gonna bring in a new group to talk about what's really becoming a big thing, vaping. See you then.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
My mom thinks hashtags are something you eat with eggs. She legit has a meltdown every time her phone updates. Last week, she asked me to explain chat snap. So of course, she chose the absolute wrong internet provider, and now we have the slowest internet ever.
Escape Planet Slow and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and it's time to take a look at vaping, an epidemic that is spreading a wave of nicotine addiction throughout the country. We'll start off with introductions to the issue from Adam Sadowasser, a graduate of Clayton Ridge and Loras College, and sophomore Nick Stravopoulos.
Our life is built on decisions and the reactions to those decisions, whether it's an adult, a high school student, or whoever. If we look at 1964, the Surgeon General released the first report linking cigarette use to negative health side effects like heart disease and lung cancer. And at the time, 40% of Americans smoked cigarettes. Since then, that number has dropped to 18%. Now we're faced with something new. Whether you call it vaping, electronic cigarettes, juuling, right? It's the same thing as combustible cigarettes and people using the form of nicotine. So the real question for us is, when are we going to make a decision that we do not need this in our lives? Or are we going to wait for someone to give us a report when it's already a huge epidemic? So it's really important for us to think about what decisions are we going to make and what reactions are we going to do related to those decisions.
Thank you very much. Nick?
Vaping has affected both my friends and family. But when I hear about vaping, I hear the two different views, the adult view and the teen view. The adult views consist of, why are they harming their bodies with this product? Why are they smoking? And the teen's view usually consists of, it's a stress reliever, it's cool, there's no harm to your body. So what are the clear effects of it? Well, there's many theories on what affects, but the main proven theory of what can it cause to your body is that due to the high amounts of nicotine in the products, it creates cravings. Cravings is caused when you breathe in large amounts of either Juul or any other vape product, and it releases it into your brain, causing an addiction once when you stop using the product. This is bad, and we don't know why children are using it. So I looked at social media. When I looked at social media, children see it as a funny, cool, and there's really nothing protecting against it. So I wish to see something improved against it. There's programs like The Real Cost, who are out there to stop alcohol prevention, marijuana, and most preventative vaping. Their goal is to stop children from using it and manage social media look upon vaping. The other solution I see would be to improve vape and e-cigarettes to be safer for usage. The only way this could be done is by limiting the nicotine use. Most products are just having high amounts of nicotine, and children are just buying into them. If we can lower the amount of nicotine in the products, children would have a safer product to use. Because I strongly believe, through experiences in my life from even my brother, they do not stop using it even though there's these clear effects. It needs to be either lessened or we need to find a safer way to push them from stopping using it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. You know, that raises an important issue. And Nick made a real powerful point as to that, is that it's almost impossible for people that are addicted to nicotine to stop. And we've learned this from cigarettes, and sometimes we wonder, is vaping just a new way to deliver nicotine? And we look back at cigarettes and we all agree that they were bad for you. And primarily what they did was deliver nicotine, because it was addiction that drove that industry. And now we're seeing something similar with vaping. And, you know, maybe over the generations, the businesses just have to change the way they market. I don't know. Let's find out. Haley, why are you here today?
Well, I know a lot of people personally that vape, and I know that they know the side effects, and I'd just like to make it aware to everybody that vaping has side effects and that it can really impact how you live and your physical activities, and not just that, but your social activities too.
Yeah, when we look at vaping as being primarily a nicotine delivery, and we pretty much know smoking was bad, and that was a nicotine delivery, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, does it?
No, not really.
Sam, why do you think people, especially your peers, are using vaping things?
Well, I think they start out mostly thinking that it's cool, because I really don't think that any advertisements or anything that's happened to them from seeing it or doing it is positive. I don't think you gain anything from using a Juul or from a vape or anything like that. So I think it's mostly a feeling they're chasing, like either trying to be cool or a buzz, it's called. They're just trying to be something they aren't, I think.
So you don't see a really good outcome from anything to do with vaping? No. Well, that makes sense. Melissa? Why are you here today? Tell us.
Well, they asked me to be a part of this panel, and I thought I don't really know a lot about vaping, and I decided that that's probably the point, is I don't know much about it. I don't know who is really using it. I don't know how to fight it exactly. But I think about my mom, who passed away from lung cancer, and she was a smoker for probably 50-some years, and then quit and thought, okay, that's great. And I mean, I was one of those kids like you probably, with some of your parents who had learned all the bad effects of cigarette smoking and went home with the mission to get my mom to quit smoking. And she couldn't quit no matter what. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized how strong that addiction was. But after she kicked the habit and later developed lung cancer, the regrets that she had, she just told me that when she started smoking at 14 years old, that everybody was doing it. Every actor and actress on TV was doing it. The doctor in the medical office was smoking. She smoked while she was pregnant, while she was holding me, the whole works, and never really thought it was that bad. And I'm just afraid that youth today are probably having the same dilemma in front of them, that how bad is it? And we don't really know anything. And it wasn't until long after she was addicted that she realized all the harmful effects. And I just hate to see a generation of kids having regrets someday down the road just because they weren't educated. And I'm not educated enough about it, and so I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, an interesting thing happens, because my children are who got me to quit. I was a child of a generation of parents that grew up in a world where smoking was really cool. So my parents grew up in a world not unlike vaping, where, hey, cigarettes were just normal. They were everywhere in the house. I mean, they were ubiquitous. People smoked because it was cool. When I grew up, I started smoking, but my children were going to school learning how bad it was. And they spent a lot of time, I mean, they got me to quit cigarettes. It's a long story, longer than this segment, but they did. They were very effective at it. And what you see sometimes is if you're the generation that gets targeted with something new, like my parents were when smoking really exploded, you're the ones whose children are going to grow up coming home from school to try and get you to quit. And so as a former smoker, my thing is seeing the correlations between nicotine delivery systems being a cigarette or a vaping tool. It's like, geez, it's sort of important to realize that you might be setting a precedent that's really, really bad. And someday your kids are going to come home and say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, you need to quit that. It's bad for you. So maybe we're hoping with shows like this to start that now. So you're thinking about it before it impacts your life in such a way where lung cancer might be the outcome. Sam, what do you think? Have you looked at some of the other things happening? I mean, do you really see it as a major health epidemic, or is it sort of a casual thing like you feel people will get over it?
Well, I think at this point where it's not crazy, like it's obviously spreading very fast and the nicotine levels are rising, but with where they are now and kind of how early it is, I think that like people know there's a thing called popcorn lung and that eventually it could happen, but they think, oh, I can just stop whenever, so I'm not going to worry about it. But eventually when they become seriously addicted and these problems, and there's more nicotine and they need more, and the problems become more and more evident, I think it will become more of an epidemic than it is now.
So you think it might even get worse?
I think it certainly could.
Haley, what are your thoughts? Like amongst your friends, what's the dialogue been like about things like vaping?
Well, I feel like everybody thinks it's really cool and like it's just a thing that people do and it's not that big a deal, but they don't really realize some of the side effects that vaping can have. And with groups of soda, like kids in soda, it can impact them because people will think if they talk about how bad it is, then it can be kind of embarrassing for them. And I feel like that has a social impact on people, and it also has physical impacts because if you want to try out for some sort of group, then vaping can affect how you breathe and like how you can play those sort of sports.
Melissa, just getting a little taste of what they're saying about it, how do you feel about it? Does it seem scary that something that can spread that quickly?
Absolutely. I think that there's just so many factors to consider. The addiction part of it, I remember my mom's being outside in the cold, snowy weather just to get her cigarette, and I thought, how crazy is that, you know? And I worry about the kids, what they'll go to, what they'll do just because of nicotine. I mean, what is nicotine? Well, how important can that really be? But also the costs. I just can't imagine. I've many times as an adult thought, I'm so thankful that I didn't smoke because the cigarette cost just kept going up. And so I'm sure, I don't know like the vaping costs, but I'm sure it's not inexpensive. And the more you need it, the more you pay. And that's money that could go to something else.
Well, we know that studies have shown, we know that anybody that's pregnant that uses a vaping tool can actually be doing more damage to a fetus than even smoking did because of the high levels of nicotine. So we know that nobody ever dealing with having a baby should do it. We also know that they started out with vaping as a potential smoking cessation tool. Now, a few years later, it's quite obvious it's not a smoking cessation tool. It's been resuscitating a cigarette industry that was having trouble making a profit because people said, we know cigarettes are bad. Nothing good about cigarettes or chewing tobacco. Now, you can still get addicted, but we knew there was nothing good about it. Well, how do you feel about being in a world now where you're the new guinea pigs for a product that's delivering the same old poison again that can not only hurt your brain development, but put your actual health at risk? What do you think?
I think that a lot of the studies have shown that vaping is really bad and students still kind of overlook that, even though that it's not really new to the older generation. They are aware of the facts because they've been through this before and they understand like vaping is essentially what smoking was back then, and now it's just kind of a rising epidemic. And I feel like the people that distribute Juuls are really targeting kids because they know that they haven't done what smoking has done, or they haven't like been through what smoking, the adults that have smoked, and it's just kind of an epidemic that I feel students aren't really used to. So,
yeah, when we look back at ads over the years, for the last 100 years, ads have always targeted kids because they always know that kids are the ones that are, in a sense, maybe it's stupid brave, but brave enough to try a lot of stuff. The problem is that a lot of people are trying to get you to try stuff that's taking advantage of you. It's sort of predatory. Now, Sam, do you think, do you guys feel like you live in a predatory world, or do you feel like, nah, I can handle it if it's around me?
I mean, personally, I think I can handle it. I'm not really about that kind of stuff, but I feel like you watch advertisements, and on the surface, they seem, oh, those people are just, having fun, drinking a beer, hitting a Juul, whatever. Not like it doesn't look bad looking at it, so people will overlook all the things that are like hidden in it, where it's like, oh, it's addicting, it's bad for you, you can get in a car and seriously hurt somebody. But they see that they can be something that they're not, or maybe they want to be, and they might chase that instead of looking deeper into what it can actually do to you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all of your thoughts. Stay tuned. After a short break, we'll have a chance to speak with a few members of the audience Think of some questions you want to ask. You don't want to miss this.
Kids go through phases, but Jeremy went through painkillers, bottles of vodka, and his mom's purse when he needed more. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Don't forget to tip him.
I know, Mom. I know.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Sharing. I mean, I don't mind it when there's enough to go around. Toys with Charlie? Okay. My mint ice cream? Fine. Our slow internet with my whole family at the same time? That's pushing a man too far.
Get unlinked and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Welcome back to this special edition of Surviving Bad from MFL MarMac in Monona, Iowa. And we're going to entertain some questions from our audience, and let's see what we have happening. We have a question in the back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, as a teacher, I don't know much about juuling, and being 40 years old, this is something totally new to me in the last year. And I'd asked a student once, I said, is this really something that a lot of people do? I said, I've never really seen anybody do it before. And I had asked them, like, what percentage of students do you think in our high school, juul or have done this before or do this regularly? And I was shocked when they had told me, I think it'd be like 70 or 80%. And I said, that many? And they're like, yeah. Now, I don't know if that's the truth, but I think that's something that an audience and people watching the show would want to know, especially people of a little older generation like myself, because it's a new thing. And I was shocked to know how many people, the younger generations, were actually doing this. So I think that'd be something that we could ask. We don't have to have, kids say, I do it, but, what percentage do these students, think that others around them are juuling?
All right, because that's a great point, and I'm going to get to a different point from that same answer. How many of you in the audience have ever used a vaping device or a juul? Okay, now I'm going to try it a different way. All teachers, faculty, and adults, except for the production crew, will close your eyes on cue. When I say close, you close. When I say open, you open. All adults, please, bear with us. Close your eyes. Every teacher, principal, everybody, eyes are closed. I'm looking at their eyes closed. Okay, now, how many of you, raise your hand real quick, how many of you have ever used a vaping tool or been around vaping? All right, get them down before they can't hold them back. Okay, the numbers go up. And every time I would do that exercise, if I sent them out of the room, even more would go up. You're right. A lot of kids are doing this. But the breakdown here isn't what kids are doing, and it's the really breakdown is that adults don't know. And the interesting thing about things like vaping is that they are created as marketing tools. Vaping didn't just appear and say, hey, what a great idea, let's share it with somebody. Vaping was developed by a bunch of Chinese scientists that were trying to find a way to reinvent the cigarette business. They developed the vaping tool. And they went to American tobacco companies and said, and they're making a lot of money right now. They said, we have this tool. You guys are suffering. You're losing customers. 200,000 people a year die from lung diseases and things related to smoking. You have trouble selling your product. We have something new and cool. We put a USB port in the computer. We can sell it to kids, and you can get all those new customers back that you want selling the same product you've been selling for 100 years. So the breakdown is that this is happening to our kids with adults that you and I grew up with just to make money. They're repackaging the same poison. So the same way that you're shocked by how many there are, I'm hoping that people watching this show see, and the kids in the school see that I'm being used. People are taking advantage of me, getting me to make them a profit with something that ultimately is going to hurt me. So that's the big breakdown. And a lot of that comes from like talking to parents. As a teacher, people aren't going to talk to you about that. As a parent, your parents aren't going to. When we ask kids about how hard is it to talk to your parents about something? If you see something at school you want more information on, you know what happens? The kids say, oh, that's no good. I go to my mom and I say, I saw somebody with this vaping thing. What do you know about that? Mom goes, what are you doing? What are you looking at? They freak out. Parents are the last people you can talk to, aren't they? We're hard to talk to. We're so hard to talk to that a bunch of people can sell you stuff like vaping without your parents or teachers even knowing you use it. There's somebody actually taking advantage of that. So that's a great point, and this is a learning curve, and I hope you guys learn it before you get as old as I was when my kids had to come home from school and get me to quit smoking. Any other questions? You had one there, Bob Marley. Right? Yeah, nice shirt, by the way. I like the Whalers, good band.
You're right. Anyways,
Yeah.
do I really need this? Oh, okay. So when the marijuana panel was up there, they said how there is negative and positive effects on marijuana. And then you had the alcohol panel up there, and during that, they never said how there's any positive effects on alcohol. Then why is it that alcohol is so, I'm trying to find the right word. So like.
Prevalent?
Sure. Okay. And more used in like, people like, oh, it's legal, so it can't be as bad for you. Or it's more of a socializable thing. Or cops don't talk about it as much as marijuana. Or people don't talk about meth as much as marijuana. But you see more people die from alcohol use than you do than marijuana.
Absolutely. Alcohol is our #1 problem. And it's very hard to deal with because it's been around so long and so profitable. The issue is simple. We have a world that's driven in a free market economy by profits. Just because somebody is stupid and buys something that's bad for them doesn't make that company a villain in this country or in this world. So we put stuff out there. It's up to you to determine if you're going to be smart enough to use it or not use it. It's not like a direct comparison of marijuana, alcohol, or opioids, or heroin. The thing you have to forget about is which one's not as bad as the other, because if they were guns, it's like, I don't think I want to be shot by a .44. Can you shoot me with a .22? It's going to hurt a little bit less. I mean, these are all things that are going to hurt you, for God's sakes. Does it matter how much? Any other questions? Yes. Right there.
I actually got two. Isn't it true that vaping has formaldehyde in it?
Yes.
And I think kids should get from like 10 to 12 should be educated before they're teens, so they're not so, what's the word, that they like to go against their parents and stuff.
That's actually sort of a brilliant observation, because psychologists that we work with doing research studies at Iowa State University and with Mayo Clinic are starting to say that, you know, these advertisers are starting to influence kids when they're 4, 5, and 6 years old. We need to talk to them sooner. And in terms of the chemicals, this is frightening. We just did a show on vaping, and it's on YouTube and on the Mediacom channel. Scientists showed us what chemicals were in cigarettes, and that really scared a lot of people. There's twice as many chemicals coming out of a vaping tool, because they put so many perfumes and flavors and other things in there, and they're not regulated in any way. So you're actually getting more poisons and more toxins from vaping that you would ever have gotten from cigarettes. Now, I'm not trying to tell you should smoke cigarettes instead of vaping. Shouldn't do either one. But the vaping industry, guess what? We're finding the kids that vape end up smoking cigarettes because cigarettes are cheaper than vaping. So once they get you addicted, you're not going to care where you get your fix. So both of those points are great. There's more chemicals in vaping tools than there were originally in cigarettes. And yes, advertisers are targeting children younger and younger. There was a study done in Atlanta of 5-year-olds. 83% of 5-year-olds had a favorite beer. Dig that, 5-year-old, favorite beer. This is fascinating. They couldn't figure out what it was, but they figured out that there were a certain percentage that had Budweiser. They even had 5% of the kids liked Heineken. And they figured out it was the advertising they were watching on TV, because the percentages of the beer ads correlated with the preference of a beer. They'd never tasted a beer. They just saw Budweiser commercials with animals and horses and thought, wow, these are really cool. So they have a favorite beer. If you have a favorite, it's Budweiser. What's going to happen when they're 14, 15, 16, 13, and somebody says, here, have a Budweiser? Already in their mind, they're going to think, like you were pointing out, getting younger and younger, oh, wait a minute, I had a favorite beer because it was really cute, and there were puppies in it, and there was horses. Man, that's pretty, you might think that was sort of false advertising if you look at it closely, wouldn't you? It certainly does influence people, and you're right. You're already at an age where you might already have an opinion where I'm talking to you or a panel's talking to you, and you're not listening to a thing we're saying because you're saying, hey, I'm vaping, I love it, I don't care what anybody says. Or I use weed, I think it's great. You know, you're welcome to think that way. What we're trying to do is to get everybody that doesn't already think that way to think about what they're doing so you don't make that choice. Because other than making big companies a lot of money, it doesn't do much for you. There's a lot of great things you can do. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. Wait, go. How'd you hate him here because you're closer? Sorry, the mic will get to you next.
All right, so I thought that we can't have smoking commercials on TV. So with Juul, I saw that they made switch from cigarettes to Juuls on TV. So like, why are we having TV commercials about Juuls and we couldn't have TV commercials about smoking?
In 1962, the Surgeon General came out and said we should not advertise cigarettes on TV. It took over 20, 30 years before that happened. Really, the fact is that law is a very convoluted thing, and a lot of lobbyists from big companies that are trying to sell these things have an influence in how laws are written. So you're absolutely, to you it makes perfect sense. Why would Juuls be advertised when you can't advertise cigarettes? It doesn't make any sense. But see, that's why we're trying to put sense into you. So you have common sense and you recognize that, and they can't take advantage of you by doing it. So again, another really good point. See, those are learning points. That's how you get through the world as sort of a skeptical buyer. You say, why does that happen and why doesn't it happen? Well, you figure that out and then act upon it responsibly. All right, we had someone in the back that's ready to talk right here. There he is.
Whoa. Is marijuana an overdosable kind of substance?
You know, I read something online, it was sort of funny, that they said if you lined up a certain amount of marijuana and somebody started smoking at one end of it, about partway through they'd be ordering a pizza, falling asleep, and everything else. THC has in young children caused overdoses and sent them to emergency rooms. THC at really high potency levels can put you in the emergency room. It causes psychoses, all kinds of psychological reactions, schizophrenia. So yes, but not in a traditional sense that it kills you quickly. It kills you really slowly and also puts you in a position where it might hurt people around you. So it's just a matter about being careful, man. You gotta just not believe what people say. They're trying to get into your head, into your pocketbook, and control this. The most important thing you have is your brain. That's the real estate that alcohol, nicotine, marijuana all influence in a negative way, and you need to protect that with the most power you have. Thank you very much for being here today. Give everybody a good hand. And thank all of our viewers for watching Surviving Bad. You've gotten some of the most innermost feelings out of people here. This high school is moving forward with some great initiatives in trying to keep themselves healthy and strong. Let's hope sharing that with you helps your school do that too. Thank you very much from Surviving Bad and MC22 Mediacom, your local programming leader.
I'm very encouraged being here today watching all of the students with the SOTA organization. You know, it's really impactful, I think, when the youth are doing it. I was a DARE instructor for a number of years, and I see some of the same concepts come up that we addressed in DARE. And some of this, I think in particular for me, was consequences. The decisions have consequences. The reasons that people do drugs haven't changed, and they probably never will change. But the kinds of drugs that are being used now and the way they're delivered, it calls for a different approach.
I have always been a firm believer that you are taught from home. The problems that you face and the solutions and how you handle those problems, they come from home. They come from your values. They come from what's important to you. So I think that it's really important to get these messages out to parents and to get shows like this out to parents, because when the parents are involved and they understand what their kids are going through, they can look more through the eyes of their kids and try to get down on their level and talk to them about it and be understanding.
I think parents definitely should watch this show. They need to be educated, and if they are not actively talking to their kids or their students about this topic, I think this is a great way for them to get some information that they would have not otherwise gotten.
I hope that after seeing this show, I hope
kids feel more comfortable talking with their parents about topics such as substance abuse, because as kids, we grow up in a society where that's a big issue and it's an increasing epidemic, and sometimes as kids we don't know how to talk about it. And I think seeing it today, I hope from my perspective that kids in my age, as seniors, we're going off to college soon, and I hope that when they are put in that situation or they come to terms with the situation that we're in, that they can hopefully think about this day and have a better outcome.
I feel that parents will perceive this show hopefully as an educational tool that they will be able to have conversations with their kids. I think the topics around substance use and abuse can be challenging for parents, and they don't know what to say or how to talk to their children. But after having this show, it can open up communications at home.
I think that today was an amazing opportunity to get some people to think about this more. I think it's a really important thing to focus on, and I know that a lot of kids feel like we talk about it constantly. They're constantly being given information, but I don't think you can be educated enough. So I think today was a great opportunity to do that.
Well, seeing my classmates and everything come forward about how they feel about the epidemic that's going around in our school, it was very inspiring. I've known many people who have fallen victim to a lot of substances.
I am just completely amazed and overwhelmed. There was a problem at this school when I first started with substance use and abuse, kids getting in trouble, and we wanted to come up with a prevention method rather than being proactive after the fact that they've turned to substances for ways to cope and gotten into trouble. We wanted to form a group of students that would band together with the same morals, values, beliefs, stand up for one another, and learn about all the negative effects of substance use and move forward. And I am just completely overwhelmed with the amount of student leadership that have come on board and made this group into what it is today.
I think the Soda Group is proud that they got to do this. I think we are proud as an organization that we are going to make an impact. And even if we change the views of one person out there, we'll know that that one person is better off. That one person knows more. And I think we're all just really proud of that.
Or someone you care about are looking for help with treatment or recovery, there is help out there. Please visit these sites.
the school community is working very hard to develop good coping skills for the people they have found out do have these addictions or are starting to. But the problem is they're not doing enough. What you get in this school when you are found vaping on school premises or something like that is you get a suspension, and then you have to talk to the counselor for like a day. That's it. You don't get a referral to a psychologist or anything like that. All you get is a suspension. I know several people who have done it, and I know several people who are currently getting help for these because I have spoken out against it. I have talked to their parents. I have gotten them the references to these, let's say, AAA meetings.
The way the show transpired today, I was a little nervous how it was all going to go and take place, and as it all pulled together with the adults, with Mediacom, with Peter from Drug Free Iowa, I mean, it was just amazing to see them all speak from their heart, hopefully touch another person in the audience. I just hope that someone, at least one person today, can leave after seeing this broadcast or show and take something to heart themselves. And as Lauren said in the beginning of her speech today, was that we believe everybody matters, everybody does matter, and it's all about the choices that they make, and hopefully there is one person today that can help them make the right choice for a better future.